Now, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very big welcome to Lecture 6. Today, I'm going to be talking about Chapter 7, which is really about managing risks in organizations. I'm going to go and specifically, I'm going to describe the risk management process. I'm going to understand how do we identify project risks. We're going to assess the significance of different project risks. We're going to describe the different responses to really managing all of those risks. We're going to understand the role contingency plans play in risk management process. We're going to understand opportunity management and describe the 4 different approaches to responding to opportunities in a project. We can understand how contingency funds and time buffers are used to manage risks on a project. We're going to recognize the need for risk management being an ongoing activity. And we're going to go and describe the change control process. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very small sketch. The maths clearly shows that my project won't actually, work even if we do everything right. It is embarrassing to cancel a project in the middle. Let's act dumb and hope someone in upper management cancels it for budget reasons. Should I stop buying stuff? No, you should buy twice as much. Now, this is a sort of attitude that sometimes you really go and have, although it's just a joke here, this is a sort of attitude that sometimes you go and actually have in practice. People actually not doing what they're supposed to go and be doing. They know that things won't work well. They keep on investing money in that. You can say, oh no, this never happens. Sydney Water is one of those companies that everybody knows in Australia. Sydney Water had a project. I don't remember the figure, but I'm going to try to really show you that figure. I'm going to just try to share another screen. And let me try to see if I can find it for you. So if I go here, Sydney Water cancels $50 million project. Just want to try to find where it is. Failed. Just trying to figure out because there's been, yeah, look at that. If you go and look here, it's really here. Like if you go and look at it, just try to show you, continue to site. So you can see here, Sydney Water aborted a customer information and billing system project midway through its development at a cost of $61 million. The original price to complete was $38 million. At the time of cancellation, it was estimated that another $64 million would be needed to complete the effort. This is an example of a project where a company went and had to go and keep on pushing and publishing money onto something that is not really going to be adding value to the organization. Now, this is not simply a sketch of a joke. This is really what happens in a lot of environments in IT because people don't really do the right thing. You know something is not working well, you keep on actually investing money into a project that is totally dead. That's really a very, very bad approach to be able to go and deal with things. So we need to go and try to think about risks, and the best way to deal about risk, I'm going to start with this quick video and I would like you to listen to it and then I'll continue with everything else. So this is going to really introduce a lot of the topics about what I'm going to be introducing to you more details today. So please listen up and let's continue from there. Thank you.
Today we're talking about IT risk management strategies and best practices. So first of all, why do we care about IT, information technology? Well, today IT or information technology is so integrated into everything we do. It touches almost every aspect of our life and our business. So with IT comes some unique challenges. So first of all, the technology just continues to change. So we have to consider, can the hardware, software, apps, and any kind of integrations in between them keep up? Also, finding people who are trained and have the expertise we need for all the changing technologies. Also finding people with good work ethic. And what that means is being able to show up on time, make commitments, make deadlines, and follow up and carry through with what they've committed to. There's also in IT, because it touches financial services and a lot of other personal data or company data, we have to make sure that everything we do complies with just ongoing and new regulations. So when we talk about IT risk management, what we're talking about is the application of risk management methods to information technology in order to manage those associated risks. Basically, we're assessing the business risk associated with the use of, the ownership, operation, or adoption of IT in our organization. Because if we own certain technologies or we're running on certain platforms or using them, we have to be, again, in compliance. And there's some risk to those. So how do we do that? So here are a few steps that are common to IT risk management. First of all, we need to identify the risk that are carried through with the use of our IT. So we identify the risk, then we analyze the risk. Is this a big risk? Is it a little risk? It could be a small risk, but have a huge negative impact. Or it could be a big risk, but if it happens, the impacts could be minimal. So we have to assess that, analyze that. Then we evaluate and rank those risks. Then we respond to the risk, and we respond to those through the mitigation strategies. So we monitor and review those risks constantly. So here are some strategies. So the thing about using strategies is it provides a structured approach to identify, assess, and manage those risks. Strategies also provide a process that you regularly update and review the assessment based on changes that happen to the project, the environment, the economy, whatever. And then, so here are common IT risk management strategies. So first of all, you apply safeguards. It's in avoidance. So a company may decide, we want to avoid those risks or this risk at all costs. So do everything you need to do, put all the strategies in place so we can avoid this. The second one is transferring the risk. That's transference. So you may be transferring that to another group, another organization, maybe an outside company who can handle that better. So it may be a less of a risk to whoever it is transferred to. You also, mitigation is one where you reduce the impact of that risk. You do everything, you put all the processes, methodologies, teams, whatever in place to mitigate it if it does happen. And then the fourth one is you accept the risk. You know going in what the risks are, and then you accept it without control or mitigation. You just say, if this happens, we're going to go ahead and accept it. We're going to deal with it if it occurs. So here are some best practices that I think are really important. Number one, evaluate these risks early and often. Sometimes people wait until they've encountered a risk before they even think about it. So before a project ever starts, before any implementation starts, or any conversions or migrations or integrations, think through, plan for the risk ahead of time. And then as you go along, again, you're continuing to assess those. Also involve the stakeholders, because stakeholders may have information that you don't have that they can bring in, or if you're discussing, evaluating those, they may have other best practices or historical data that will help. The third one is get sign off. So whatever strategy that is agreed upon. You want to be sure that the stakeholder, the owner, has sign off in case it does happen, specifically if you agree to accept the risk and it does occur. So if you need a tool that can help you with your IT risk management, then sign up for our software now at projectmanager.com.
All right, guys, so very, very quick introduction of that topic that is really important. You're going to find that a lot of the actual concepts you just mentioned in that short video really talks about a lot of things we are going to be covering in more details today in the actual lecture. So risk, guys, is anything uncertain or any chance events that planning cannot overcome or cannot control. We might think that something might go wrong, and if it goes wrong, it might be actually hard for us to be able to go and actually solve that specific issue. It is not something that is actually uncontrollable. So for example, if you go and working in a place and for example, there's a big earthquake, that's basically a uncertain or chance event that you cannot really plan or overcome. You might try to say, well, if this occurs, what am I going to do with it? But you might not be able to go and really control or overcome yourself. So there's that sort of risk management that we need to follow. It's really, rather than say, whenever there's a risk that occurs, let me go and react to that risks, it actually goes and try to have a steam ahead. Says, okay, well, this risk could go and occur. What am I going to do about it? So what I'm going to do about it is I'm going to go and try to attempt to recognize all of these risks, internal and external, and recognize them before they become an issue. So sit down and say, okay, I am now delivering this $20 million IT project. It's going to take 3 years' time to get delivered. And I want to sit down and try to evaluate what can go wrong in that project. This is basically part of a lot of brainstorming. People come, sit down together, discuss, and from there, they try to understand and get an information about what could go wrong. After they ask what could go wrong, they ask, how do we actually minimize the risk event's impact? So this event is going to have a consequence. How are we going to go and minimize the actual impact in a way that is going to really help us reach the right outcome? Now, what can be done before the event occurs? So in anticipation of something happening, what am I going to do? In anticipation that there might be a lot of bugs available in my software developed project, what can I do in anticipation? Well, I could go and try to recruit very good testers that are available to be able to go and do the job whenever I need to. What to do when an event occurs. So if something was to occur, if basically, let's say we wanted to try to reduce the chance of having a software that have a lot of bugs. So, okay, well, you tried everything in your power. You still got a software that had a lot of bugs in it. You have a contingency planning. What am I going to go and do now? Because the actual project that I went and actually worked on and I tried to deliver, and the system that I managed to go and deliver did actually have an issue that basically I could not go and manage as part of my risk management process. So when we talk about risks, there are two things we need to bear in mind. We need to think about this line, the cost line, and we need to think about this chances of risk occurring. Now, if the risk occur at the beginning of the project, this is basically the time. If it basically occurs more towards the planning in early stages of the project, the chance is that it won't cost me too much. Now, the risk will be high at the beginning of planning, but although the risk is high, because we're still at the beginning, because we haven't really spent millions of dollars developing something, the actual cost of that high risk is very, very low. As we progress with time, the cost starts increasing. But the chances of risks occurring starts decreasing. So if risks occurs towards the end of the project, what will happen is the cost of rectifying that will be very, very high. Because if I say the risk is about the software, And if you finish already developing the whole software at the end, then, and we find out we have an issue with it, then at the end, we need to go and spend a lot of more time to go and fix that problem. And because of that, it is going to cost me a lot more money. At the beginning, we haven't delivered a lot of work. That's why it won't cost, there's a high risk, but it won't cost me as much. But in the long term, once you deliver things, it is vice versa. The cost becomes very, very high, but the chance of getting the risk becomes low. So when I talk about risk management, why should we do it? Because we should be proactive. We should not really wait for something to go and occur and become a problem to then try to deal with it. We need to start trying to deal with the problem from the beginning. Okay, we reduce surprises. If we are prepared, we reduce surprise. Oh yeah, this is a risk. We thought about it. We knew it could occur. We've already thought about it, and we created a plan to go and manage it. So you actually reduce surprises and you reduce the negative consequences of something happening because you're prepared to deal with it. You prepare the project manager to take advantage of appropriate risks. Sometimes there are positive risks, which is what we call about more as an opportunity. If we find out that there's a potential for us to go and manage an opportunity, then that's great. How could we go and do everything in our power to be able to go and really benefit from that opportunity? That's really something we need to go and bear in mind to try to go and work. We need to provide better control over the future. This is what happens through risk management benefits. We can actually control, when we know what could go wrong, we are better prepared to deal with it. And because of that, we basically have better control over what could go and actually happen in the future. In our example, improve the chances of reaching the project performance objective within budget and within timeline. If every risk that is available, I've already thought about it, I managed it, it's already, I can have all the actions to deal with it, then guess what? I am able to go and get the project done on time. If there's any issue that basically goes and occur, I'm ready to go and deal with it very quickly. And because I'm ready to deal with it very quickly and solve it very quickly, the budget of managing things won't be so much affected. I will still be able to get things within appropriate specific timelines. When I talk about the risk management process, we talk about risk identification. So what is risk identification? We analyze the project to identify sources of risks. What are the risks? What could really go and happen? This is really more about really identification of all of those risks. Then we need to have a risk assessment. What is risk assessment? Assess the risks in terms of the severity of impact, likelihood of occurring, and how easy is it for us to be able to go and control. This is a proper assessment which will help us understand how big a certain risk is in comparison to other risks. Now, you don't just do this at the beginning, you keep on doing this because as you are progressing with the project, you will find out that there are more risks that you need to go and actually manage. So what you do is you do a risk assessment, thinking about the severity, thinking about the likelihood of occurring, and thinking about the impact. After you know what the risks and what's the impact, what's the likelihood of occurring, how easy to control, what do? Say, okay, I thought about all of these risks. Let me go and think about what can I do to respond to those risks. What can I do? I can develop a strategy to reduce possible damage. That's one approach we do. I can develop some sort of contingency planning. So if this occurs, we're going to do this. If that occurs, we're going to do this. So you can create some sort of a contingency plan. You can try to develop a strategy to reduce possible damage. And finally, risk response control. If that risk then becomes a reality and it is now affecting your ability to go and really deliver the project you would like to go and deliver the project, what would you do? Then what you do is you will implement a risk strategy. So you go and do what you're supposed to go and do to deal with that risks. You don't simply implement that strategy that you've planned to go and deal with that risk, but also you monitor and adjust the plan for new risks. If things change, you basically try to go and make the adjustments accordingly. You implement a change management process, because if something was to change, you have a process. Not anybody will be able to go and say, oh, let me go and do whatever I would like and no control. No, there's a very clear approach of managing things. We go and make the right change management. We follow the process, and from there, we'll be able to go and reach the right outcomes. We'll be able to monitor the expenses. We're going to be able to make sure there's a right approval. We're going to be able to think about all of these risks that could occur if we implement the change. And I'll talk about that, and I'll show you some examples from practice a bit later. Now, ladies and gentlemen, talking about the first step is risk identification. So let us go out there. Let us think about all of these risks that could go wrong. So let's go and really identify and generate a list of all of these possible things that could go wrong. Let me use brainstorming. Let me go and identify the problems. Let me go and try to make risk profiling. It's really all about understanding everything that could go wrong at any particular point of time. And the way you do that is you start with high-level risks, and then you go down to specific event risks. Like, for example, if I talk about risks in IT projects, there could be software risks, that's a big category. There could be hardware risks, that's a big category. There could be financial risks, that could be a big category. But then when you start thinking about details, what does that actually mean in terms of risk? What does that actually mean? What do we do with all of these risks? How do we go and actually manage them? So you talk about high-level risks, and then you go all the way to start having detailed specific risks. Now, if I talk about, this is an example, risk breakdown structure. If it's my project, the high level, first level, I have sub-levels: technical, external, organizational, and project management risks. If you go about sub-level, what is the technical risk? Requirements risks, technology risks, complexity risks, performance and reliability risks, quality risks. External, subcontractors and suppliers risk, regulatory, market, customer, weather. So what you do, you basically take all of those actions accordingly to be able to go and really get the right outcomes. Look here, you can try to create a way to identify the risk. You can basically have like a risk profile or an approach for you to follow to be able to really identify what could really be a risks within your organization. So how do you go and really do that? Well, you think about technical requirements. You ask yourself, are the requirements stable? If not, that's a risk by itself. Design. Does the design depend on unrealistic or on optimistic assumptions? Okay, we need to think about that. Testing. Will testing equipment be available when needed? Development. Is the development process supported by a compatible set of procedures, methods, and tools? Schedule. Is a schedule dependent upon the completion of other projects? Budget. Is it reliable? How reliable are my cost estimates? Quality. Are there quality considerations built in the design? Well, if not, then you're having more chances of having quality problems embedded and delivered in your project. Management. Do people know who has authority for what? Work environment. Do people work collaboratively across functional boundaries, or are they, don't like collaboration? That's a big issue. Staffing. Is staff inexperienced or understaffed? Is that a problem? Customer. Does the customer understand what it will take to complete the project? Yes or no? And finally, the contractors. Are there any ambiguities in contractor task definitions? Now, this is not a full list. It's just a subset of some of the questions that you might be able to go and ask in order to really go and identify what could go and actually go wrong within my organization. If the design is poor, that's an issue by itself. If the testing equipment is unavailable, you can't deliver the project on time. Or if you don't rely on testing, you're going to go and get the project delivered late. If I think about my budget, if it's not reliable, that's a risk. I could run over budget. If my schedule is bad, I could go over schedule. All of these are things I need to go and really bear in mind and manage. Are the quality considerations built into a design? Well, yes or no. If not, there's going to be an issue I need to go and work on, because imagine you deliver a project and it is not meeting the quality requirements. What's going to happen? You are likely going to get a very poor outcomes delivered at any particular point of time. So, not going to go through every one of them, but in summary, you understand the concept. You need to go and assess the risk. You need to go and identify them. You need to take the action to be able to go and really manage them. And this is the first step, is let me go and identify what could go wrong within my organization. And by doing that, we'll be able to take the actions to be able to go and really rectify them. Secondly, we talk about risk assessment. How do we evaluate the risk? Is it a big risk? Is it a small risk? Well, there are so many ways. We could go about scenario analysis for event probability and impact. So you could, a lot of time, I remember previously BP went and created some scenarios of what could happen in the world. It was like a 10-year scenario. And it's very detailed video. They had scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3. And they went and tried to assess, well, what could likely go and happen in practice? Well, they went and analyzed every scenario. They thought about, well, if this scenario becomes a reality, what are we going to go and do with it? They really thought about all of these things to be able to deal with any particular impact. So you think about, okay, what is the probability of a scenario occurring? And if that was to occur, what impact is that going to have on me as an organization? And that's really what we need to go and try to think about dealing with. Risk assessment metrics is another one. There's a number of things. I'll actually show you that next, but probability, impact, and likelihood of actually identifying that risk are 3 things you go and look at, and I'll show you that in a second. Failure mode and effect analysis. If there's, for example, something you're producing, you could say, okay, well, I'm trying to produce, let's say, this machine. What could actually fall? What could basically become a failure point within the organization that I need to go and actually deal with? So that's something you deal with at that specific point of time. Other things to think about is probability analysis. Is obviously decision trees, net present value, Peart methods. All of these are probability, thinking what could go wrong, what's the probability, and what can we actually go and deal with. Well, decision tree, if this occurs, we'll do this. If this occurs, we'll do this. So that's basically what we think about. Semi-quantitative scenarios is where you kind of have questions like the one I showed you earlier, but you actually supplement that with some calculations, and you basically use both of them to be able to go and think about what could go wrong within the organization. So when I talk about the conditions of impact, so you could think, for example, here about this example. You can say, all right, I want to use qualitative information. I want to really go and use quantitative data. So you kind of have numbers here. You say, okay, I want to also use qualitative, not quantitative. So you're going to say, okay, cost. I want to go and manage cost. I want to go and manage time. I want to manage scope, manage quality. We think about all of these various objectives that we're trying to go and really think about and manage. So if you think about cost, what could actually go wrong? Very low, insignificant cost increases. Okay, cost increases of less than 10%. Cost increases of 10 to 20%. Cost increases of 20 to 40%. Cost increases going larger than 40%. So that's basically some of the stuff to be able to go and bear in mind. If you don't think about time, insignificant time increase, less than 5%, 5 to 10%. So you start trying to kind of think about what could go wrong, and you start trying to kind of make some way to really go and try make a financial assessment of what could go wrong at any particular point of time. And that's something we need to go and bear in mind. This is another example. I was telling you, failure mode and effect analysis. So what we try to do, try to think about, okay, what could go wrong in our project? And you try to kind of use this method where it multiplies the impact, the probability, and the detection difficulty to be able to get a risk value. So if I think about, okay, likelihood 4, impact 4, detection difficulty 4, you try to really go and multiply them together, and based on that multiplication, you'll be able to get a number, and the highest number means that is basically the risk that is more likely going to go and be occurring and have the biggest impact. So we basically think about that, and we'll try to go and manage that particular risk. It also tells you, for example, when could this issue happen? Interface problems during conversion, system freezing during startup, user backlash during post-installation, hardware malfunction during installation. So you try to go and think about various practices to actually go and bear in mind to go and get the job done. Now, if you go and look about the likelihood and impact, it's basically transferred here. Impact, likelihood. 4 by 4. 4 by 4. System freezing, 2 by 5. System freezing, 2 by 5. You can see it here. So this is really a way to go and try to think about which risks are in the red zone, which risks are in the yellow zone, which risks are in the green zone. This is basically here, although it's not yellow, but this is really the yellow zone. This is a green zone. It's not a big problem. These are here are the big problems we need to go and think about it at any point in time. So not simply go, look at the risks, assess the risks, do what you're supposed to do with it, but also make sure you're gonna evaluate them based on the order of things to be able to go and try to get the right priorities happening. So think about that from that perspective. You know, when you go and actually think about your schedule, you think about the schedule. You try to think, okay, what's the best case scenario? What's the baseline scenario? What's the worst case scenario? You compare things. There's a 10% chance I'm going to finish in 470 days, 50% chance in 500 days, 90% chance in 590 days. Oh, well, here, based on the actual schedule, we actually forecast to finish the project in 550 days. So what you're doing, you are actually incorporating all of these various changes and trying to ensure that you are thinking about what could go wrong and trying to manage things accordingly. Risk response development. Now, if I go and think about the risk, I know what it is, I assessed it. What am I going to do about it? Well, we need to take actions. And these are the actions that were mentioned earlier in that video that you guys have listened to. So it says something along the line of, let me try to mitigate the risk. Let me reduce the likelihood of an adverse event will occur. So how do I actually reduce the likelihood of that event occurring? Let me reduce the impact of that adverse event. For example, you know, I want to try to, you know, I'll take the action to ensure that, you know, I'm going to train people on doing that task. And basically by training them, they're going to be able to do a better job at testing. So you reduce the likelihood that that issue really occurring at any particular point of time. You avoid the risk. You change the project plan to eliminate the risk or condition. For example, you say, I'm having a risk that, you know, we might not have enough testers available to go and test the application to get a quality product. Oh, that's it? Yeah. Oh, no, don't worry about it. Let's just solve it. What do you mean let's solve it? Let me go and avoid the risk altogether. How are you going to do that? Well, what I'm going to do is I am going to create an approach where I'm going to go and employ an extra tester just in case we're going to need that tester, so that I'm going to ensure that this risk is going to be avoided at all price. We're not going to go and have any issue to go and really bear in mind. Sorry. Transferring the risk. I pay a premium to pass the risk to another party, requiring build, own, operate, transfer. That's another one. But paying a premium, I go and say, okay, instead of me delivering this project, I'm going to go and you do it on my behalf. And basically it becomes your risk, not my risk, because I'm paying you and I would like you to go and give me what I'm paying you to go and get. So you basically no longer becomes your risk and you need to go and get that delivered. Build, own, operate, transfer. This is really another approach. How do you deal with that approach? Well, that approach is very simple. You go and build a, let's say you want to go and open a call center for Dell in India. What do? They build it for you. They own it. They operate it. After they build it, they own it, they operate it for a certain period. And after you're satisfied that any of the operational issues that were likely going to be experienced, after you know that they've been delivered or they've been protected, what's going to happen there is you are basically able to go and start thinking about, let me go and transfer it back to the other party back in Australia or whatever, back to that company, so that they're going to be able to then operate that specific call center by themselves. So build, own, operate, and transfer. That's the sort of things you basically go and be thinking about. Sometimes you go and you simply retain the risks. You make a conscious decision to accept the risk. If something was to go wrong, that's fine. We knew it could go wrong. We just accepted that it could go wrong. And we said, if it does, we'll go and deal with it accordingly. So you make a conscious decision to be able to go and accept a particular risk. Now, we're thinking about all of these contingency plan. What is a contingency plan? It's really an alternative plan that will be used if a possible foreseen risk event actually occurs. So if something was to go wrong, there needs to be a plan. How am I going to respond to it? If my system stops working, I need to have a way that is ready for me to go and deal with that particular issue. I'm already prepared to go and deal with that problem in the event that that problem was actually going to actually occur. So it's really about being prepared for whatever could go wrong at any particular point of time. A plan of actions that will reduce or mitigate the negative impact or consequence of any particular risk. So we think about all of that specific information. The risk of not having a contingency plan, the risk of not being prepared to act in a certain manner, if a problem was to become a reality, is you have no plan, okay? You may basically have no plan to go and actually get things done. It goes and slows your managerial response. So we don't know how to deal with it. We're going to go and ask the managers how to deal with it. And because we're going to go and ask the managers, how do we deal with it? It's going to start taking time for us to be able to go and get the job done. Decisions made under pressure can be potentially dangerous and costly. If you go and make it is, if you are trying to work on something and then suddenly you find out that, we're getting late, it's an issue, we're not ready, we're not prepared, it's going to be a problem, and you start trying to go and risk the issue, you try to go and solve the problem very quickly without really thinking as, is this the right thing? That's going to basically go and cause a lot of problems that you need to go and really bear in mind. So it's something really to really bear in mind, to consider, because that basically could become one that creates very, very big issues. So make sure you're always ready, because you don't want to be able to make very quick decisions on the fly that might be the wrong decisions for your organization. Risk response matrix. What is a risk response matrix? Well, we try to think about, risk event occurring. We try to think about a response. We try to think about, contingency plan. We try to think about trigger points. We basically go and manage. We try to think about who is responsible. So risk event, what could it be? I have an interface problem. Okay, that's fine. How do you mitigate the risk so that you would avoid the chance of having an interface problem? Well, the way I could do that, I could go and test a prototype. And the same for system freezing. I could go and test a prototype, and if I test it, I go and reduce my chances of something like this occurring. Okay, seems like a good idea. Yeah, it is actually. All right, great. Now, let's go and try to find a contingency plan. What if you test the prototype and still, after your testing, you still have an issue? What would you do? Well, if that was to occur, I'll try to work around until help really comes. We try to find a solution. If, for example, system is freezing, I'll try to reinstall the operating system. Okay, what's the trigger point that tells you you need to start implementing that contingency plan? Well, the trigger point for the interface problem is if the issue is not solved within 24 hours, then we'll try to go and try to find a workaround until help comes. That's the approach we try to follow. Who is responsible? Niels. Okay, well, Niels needs to be doing a very good job for that. System freezing. Yeah, I know, that's the prototype. Okay, what's the contingency plan? Well, if this occurs, we're going to reinstall the operating system. What's the trigger? Well, if the system remains freezing after 1 hour, we know we need to do something about it. Who's going to be responsible? It's Emilio. He's going to do that himself and solve me that particular problem. So you see there, ladies and gentlemen, we try to take the actions that are required to go and get the job done. We try to solve it in an appropriate manner. Now, there are so many risks that we go and think about and we go and create contingency planning for. Technical risks, we go and create backup strategies. So if, for example, you go and you are installing a new technology that is going to be replacing your existing technology, you want to implement a new website, you want to implement an upgrade that is going to be replacing the old stuff. So what happened there is once you go and do that, you create backup strategies. So you say, okay, I already have that my old system. It is already backed up. Because it's already backed up, if that system was to go and have an issue, if the new system, for example, what was a problem, what I'm going to do is I automatically go and revert back, install the old technology, and don't worry about the new technology. When I used to work for Career One, this used to happen. We used to go on a Sunday and on a Saturday night, we used to be making the release. And after that release that we do, we basically go and observe the website. And when we observe the website, we go and see that, okay, because of that website now, because it had an issue, we observe it, we find the problem, we try to solve it. If we don't solve it, we can't solve it. What we do, we're going to say, okay, let's install back the old website. And then from the old website, we'll be able to go and ensure things are actually going to be working, at least until we go and fix them and then install the new technology after that time. Schedule risks, what can you do? Well, use of Slack increases the risk of a late project finish. We kind of basically have that information together. So what do? We basically try to, for example, say, okay, we can go and impose a duration date. We can say an absolute project finish date. It has to be done by that particular point of time. And this way we'll try to go and ensure we put any resources required to be ensuring the job will get done within the timelines expected. Compression of the schedule due to a shortened project duration. How do I actually compress it? Well, you could compress it by trying to go and make things at the same time by adding more resources. You could compress it by trying to find new efficient ways of doing the work. So you could basically think about approaches that could go and work to be able to go and get the job done. Cost risks. Cost could be a problem. Well, yeah, because if it's going to take longer, it's going to cost more. They actually link. Take less, cost less. Take more, cost more. So if the cost increases when the problem takes longer to solve, that's normal. We decide to go and use a schedule to solve the cash flow problems. Okay. Well, if we do that, if we try to use a schedule, if we try to kind of increase the time, that's going to be an issue. Sometimes we might try to increase the time by reducing the resources. Now, that might be okay if the project does not have to be done at a particular point of time. If the project must be done by a certain period of time, that is not going to be the best approach to go and deal with things. Price protection is an approach that a lot of companies go and use. So if you go and say, all right, I want to go and deliver this project and it's going to take me 2 years to go and develop. Say, okay, so what we're going to do to actually ensure we are protected, we will sign a contract, and in that contract, we go, two things it could work. You either could go and say, well, if the cost increases, it's not my fault, it's your fault. You can order all your resources early and it is not my problem. Or another approach is a company that is doing the project for you tells you, well, we will give you this project at a certain cost, but we want to let you know that if the cost goes up because, let's say, the materials costs have actually changed all around the world, then we are going to charge you more money. So sometimes that is really what goes and actually happens. Funding risk, changes in the supply of funds for the project, can dramatically affect the likelihood of implementation or successful completion of a project. So that's another thing that we basically go and influence what we're trying to go and do. So what do we do with all of those risks? Well, what do is we try to find a way to go and manage that risk. So we try to exploit that risk, share that risk, enhance the risk, or accept the risks. Exploit it. What does that mean? We try to eliminate the uncertainty associated with an opportunity to ensure that it will happen definitely. So if, for example, we know if I finish my project early, by 5 days, I'm going to get $1 million. I do everything in my power. I pay extra money. I get more employees. I get more people, more resources just working on that project to ensure that this $1 million bonus will definitely go and actually occur and become a reality. Sometimes I might share the risk. I allocate some of the actual ownership of an opportunity to another party who is best able to capture that opportunity for the benefit. So for example, I would say, well, if for example, if for example, we're going to go and say, well, I want to go and try to finish this project on time, but I don't have the actual ability to go and get it done on time. So what am I going to do? Well, you know how we're working with this other supplier? Yeah. You know how he's doing that job for us? Yeah. Well, they are the people who are skilled in that job. They are the people who could decide whether this task will happen on time or whether it's not going to happen on time. So because they are more equipped into dealing with that problem than we are actually able to do it ourselves, then it is really much better if we go and share that risk with them, get them to go and do the actions they need to be taking so that that potential opportunity will 100% become a reality and we are able to go and deal with it. Enhance the risk. What is that? Well, taking actions to increase the probability and the positive impact of an opportunity. Not 100%, but you know what? If we go and finish it early, we could get $1 million. You know what, let me just employ a few more people and try to work efficiently. And if it occurs, that's great. If it doesn't occur, well, we try to enhance our chances and this didn't actually go and occur. Accept as being willing to take an advantage of an opportunity if it occurs, but I won't take any action. If it happens, right. If it doesn't happen, yeah, that's still okay. We don't need to take any action for that, but if it occurs, that's great. If it doesn't occur, well, it doesn't matter. We're not going to have to worry too much about this issue. It is not a problem for us. Let's really not go and complicate things and go and worry about it. These are the sort of things we need to go and really bear in mind. Now, a lot of time when we are managing projects, we need to also think about money. If a risk becomes a reality, it means it is going to actually go and cost me money to be able to go and deal with it at that particular point of time. So we try to increase the funds, contingency funds, the funds to cover project risks identified as well as unknown. Now, how much fund we go and put are linked to the identified risks of specific work packages. So The bigger the risk, the bigger the problem. The smaller the risks, the potential smaller costing we go and actually put. So there's two sort of risks. There's budget reserves. Sorry, there's two funding related risks. There's budget reserves and there's management reserve. Budget reserves are linked to the identified risks of a specific work package. So you might say, all right, I want Fadi to be working on testing the module of reporting, and you know that there could be things running late there. So what do? You go and actually say, for that particular specific work package, we are going to be basically increase a budget reserve. And the reason why we increase it, because if the task was going to take $100, we increase it by 20, for instance, and by increasing that budget, we are actually ensuring that we have the chance of having that cost already been thought of before that project even started. So we've already calculated that extra costing. So when we go and evaluate that risk, we cannot go and say that the project was actually delivered late. Management reserve are large funds to be used to cover major unforeseen risks. For example, change in the project scope of a total project. We think about that. So if we go there, we talk, okay, let's say, all right, this is a project, it's finished. We're going to basically say it's going to cost us $1 million. We add, that's including the budget reserve. You might have the management reserve. Management might add an extra 100,000. Say why? Well, what if something unforeseen? What if something we didn't think about was to happen? What if someone comes to me and say, well, you know what? I know we told you we want all of this, all the requirements, but somebody was coming to me and saying, well, I want to go and increase those requirements. I want to go and actually get something extra done. What are we going to do about that if that was to occur? And that's really something really relating to the management reserve that we need to go and think of to be able to go and get the job done. Now, I'll show you some examples of this budget and management reserves in the next slide. All right, guys, so building from all of these contingency funding that we spoke about, budget reserve, managing reserves, and so on, we basically try to think a lot of times about also try to create a contingency from a time perspective. Amount of time used to compensate for unplanned delays. So a lot of time, for example, an activity might take a lot of risk because it could take longer. Sometimes an activity might be a merge activity, which will basically go and take longer. So if it's a merge activity, that's mean many activities before it could cause that activity to actually go and be delayed. So that's another problem to actually go and bear in mind. Sometimes there's non-critical activities that we might go and try to delay those activities, and because they're non-critical, later on down the track they become potentially a risk issue. So there's sometimes we don't have resources available that could basically go and affect the time. So there's a lot of actions that we go and try to undertake to be able to go and get protected from a potential risk perspective that we really need to go and bear in mind. You think this is a small example that shows you, this is, for example, a budget baseline. This is a budget reserve. This is a project budget. So design going to be 500 for the baseline. We might go and actually increase a reserve of 15. That will mean that my activity will be $515. For coding, we do the same. For testing, we'll do the same. So you can see the project budget baseline is 1420, but then the reserves actually goes and add to that, and it becomes a project budget of 1517. You go and add to that the management reserve, and you see, okay, on top of all of these costings, managing go and actually add an extra cost of 50, which basically is for any unanticipated things that are not related to any specific work package that we are actually working on. So you add all of these together, and basically that creates an approach to go and manage all of these very particular risks. 4 things. We go, we manage it, we know the cost. We're going to need to go and actually control the response. So if that risk was to become reality, we need to go and take the actions that are required. We need to go and take the control that is required to get the job done. So the risk control is really more about executing of the strategy that we've developed to be able to go and deal with those risks. That's why we went and developed a strategy to be able to find a way for us to be able to go and deal with that particular problem. So we go, and the way we do it is we try to execute that risk response strategy. We monitor the triggering events. If that's upon, if for example, the system falls down and it stays down for over an hour, is my triggering point. I go and monitor those triggering points, because once those triggering points are monitored and they basically become an issue, then straight away I go and take the action that is required to be able to go and deal with that problem. Once I monitor the triggering event and I know that's a problem, then I can initiate contingency planning. It's really more about, let's go, the plan that I basically said I'm going to go and follow, I'm going to go and implement that plan. So if I say this risk becomes an issue, if for example, the system falls down and I said I'm going to go and restart the system and get a new testing done, well, that's my contingency planning. After the system falls down, I go and implement that contingency plan to go and deal with the actual problem. I go and I keep on watching for new risks, things that could go wrong. I keep on watching for them, because as I move along, I don't simply need to go and assess and work on the risks that I thought would be an issue. I also need to go and work on the risks that I did not think about, and I need to go and think about for the long term. So something to go and really bear in mind. Now, a lot of times, guys, when sometimes the issue that occurs might actually cause me to go and have a need to go and implement a change in my organization. For example, you might go and find that I'm delivering a system, and that system is awesome, and it's supposed to go and work great, but there's only one thing about that, is that that system, what is happening with it is the modules that we're delivering, or the features we're delivering, we thought were really, really great features. But what we find out is one of my competitors has already delivered those specific features. And if I'm not going to go and deliver that same feature or even a better feature than my competitor, I am going to be losing a lot of customers in the next 6 months period. So what do we do? Well, because we're aware of that risk now, we'll start taking the appropriate action. We'll start, for example, saying, all right, I'm going to go and implement some change. I'm going to tell the guys that I would like to make some change to make my system better. And that change is going to go through a very detailed assessment process for us to decide whether that particular change is going to be of benefit to my organization or not. So we go and work on it based on that specific perspective. So what we go is we go and monitor and track all of these potential changes. We report on the risks that could be delivered because of all of those changes. We, by having a change management process that everybody could see how things are being properly and plainly evaluated, what will happen is we'll have an environment where our organization is very open to the change. We basically monitor what is happening. We go and keep on doing a repeat of risk identification assessment as we're moving along. Even when I go and have a change that needs to be implemented, I assign responsibilities for managing risks at any point of time. And a lot of time it could be risk that is related to those changes that I'm trying to go and actually implement. So when I talk about a risk, you talk about a risk register. If, for example, for your assignment, you need to go and create a risk register, that could be a structure you might want to follow. There's a risk ID, there's a reported date, there's who reported, there's a description, trigger date, likelihood, impact, mitigation plan, who's the owner, what's the status, what's the comments. So you basically try to go and track the risk, and if they're closed, you basically track that information and ensure they're closed. But the trigger date, what's the likelihood of it's occurring? What's the impact? Obviously, you can see low, medium, and high impact. And a risk that is of low impact is not going to really attract the sort of attention and the sort of decisions that needs to be done as a totally different risk that is for example, something that is actually going to be shorter or a lower level risk that we have at any particular point of time. So we really need to go and think about what sort of risks we need to go and consider and think about within your organization. Now guys, this is a question for you. Anybody know what a scope creep is? And if you don't know, that's fine. I want you to go and make some research. You try to tell me what is scope creep. And I also want to go and see some responses. You can either tell me the responses or you can go and type those responses as part of the chat boxes. So I'm going to ask you again this question. Could you please tell me what is scope creep? If you know the answer, you can answer it now. If you don't know the answer, just make some search and tell me what you believe the answer really is.
Hi, sir. I believe it is when you have set your project and you still try to add tasks and things on it, that becomes a scope creep.
So you've already created the project, you've already decided what you want to do in that project, and then after you've already decided on everything, what will happen is someone else comes and tell you, oh, you know what, I want you to now go and I want you to go and deliver extra things for me that you didn't think about in the past. So they're basically adding more requirement than the requirement that has already been approved. Is that what you're saying, Macon?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I go and read some responses. It's saying, you know, Kevin saying, you know, is when there are added requirements in the middle of the project. That's called scope creep. And Chinani saying when there are changes in the project. Japneet saying when we're adding features and functionality without addressing the effect of time. Arjun saying it means how the project requirements increase over the period of the project. And Japneet is commenting on the cost and resources. Guys, yes, you're right. There's changes that occur in the organization. Do you think that's a big risk? How big of a risk do you reckon scope creep is in organizations? What do you think?
Yeah, it is a big risk.
Why is it a big risk? Why not a small risk?
Because you can fail your project.
It could fail your project.
Yeah.
Well, it would particularly fail the project if the way that risks can be added is not very planned. If anybody could come to you today and say, all right, I would like to go and do extra stuff. If that's the case, then that basically goes and become an issue. If it's not the case, if basically you have a very clear process that is very well considered and planned when it comes to change management, then it won't be too much of a problem. But when the change and the way you manage the change is not very well planned and managed, that becomes very, very much of a big issue. How would you manage scope creep? Now, let me ask you this question. If scope creep is coming from your manager, if your manager coming and asking you for more things than what we've agreed on, how would you manage scope creep that is coming from your manager? How would you manage scope creep that is coming from your manager? Anyone? Would you say, no problem, manager, I'll do you what you want? Well, I'm seeing some responses. If it will affect the project in a negative way, you can say no. Yeah, that's correct. You could say no. Mohammed, what do you mean by we can replace? Replace the manager? What do you mean, Mohammed? Man, it's very, I think the manager a lot of time is the one who replaces Mohammed. We need to be very careful there. But we need to try to be a bit political. We need to try to make a discussion saying, well, you asked me for all of these changes. And you know, I know you're the boss and I know you make the requirements. But as you know, if we're going to go and actually try to get things, extra things, and we haven't actually gone through the process of approving those changes, you know that this is going to go and actually impact on our reputation. You're going to need to go and talk in a diplomatic manner show them how, if we're going to go and implement that change that he's talking about, the effect on our project is going to be really immense, and we need to really go and think about it and try to manage that issue accordingly. So we need to try to act in a manner that is somewhat diplomatic and somewhat going to actually be adding the understanding of why we should not be taking one action or we should be taking that action. So without having a very clear approach of discussion and engaging together, you are most likely not going to actually get the right outcomes that we're trying to go and get from the organization. So if the customer comes and asks me and say, I would like to go and I would like more requirements, how would you manage this change that is being requested by the customer? Would you say no? Would you say yes? Would you say yes, but? What would you do? Change that is coming from your customer. How would you manage that? You can type your answers, that's fine. You can say them, that's fine. Right, I can see responses started to follow. Yeah. So explain to the customer about the effect on time, cost, and resources. Yeah, exactly. So you're going to go and depend on time and work progress. So okay, a lot of people are saying no. So we're going to say no to the customer. Well, in the agile project management methodology, a lot of time we say yes to the customer. We basically tell them, yes, no problem. We're going to deliver something that is meeting your requirements. And because of that, we are going to basically be delivering exactly what you want. If we want to deliver your requirements, we're going to have to go and incorporate changes. If we don't want to incorporate changes, then we're not going to be able to really go and get your outcomes. So a lot of times what we do, we go and tell the customer, yeah, no problem, we're going to go and give you what you want. But a lot of times we don't tell them we're going to give you what you want without really showing them the impact. So we're going to go and say, oh, yeah, Mr. Customer, you want something? Yeah. Well, no problem. We're going to go and need to go and we want you to follow the change request process. Oh, what is a change request process? Well, Mr. Customer, the change request process means if you want to change, you go and make a request using the form that we have available. In that form, you tell us what change you would like to go and do. Once we receive your information about what change you would like to do, what we will do is we are going to go and we are going to be speaking and evaluating all of these risks that you spoke about. We're going to go and look at it. We're going to go and look at that request. We're going to evaluate its risk. We're going to evaluate its technical impact. We're going to evaluate whether we can do it. We're going to evaluate its time impact. We're going to evaluate its budget impact. We're going to evaluate all of this information. Then we will come and tell you, okay, we are happy to go and cover this project for you, but this request is going to go and cost you, for example, $1 million extra. You approve this extra bill, then we will able to go and deliver what you're requesting. If you don't actually approve the financial impact that is going to be delivered because you requested we go and make some changes there, we're going to go and say, well, we're not going to be able to get you what you want just because of that particular information. So you have a clear process. You tell them, yeah, but we want you to follow the process. And once we go and evaluate the change and tell you what impact that's going to have, then from there, we could start discussing whether you would like us to go and actually deliver that outcome for you at that point of time. Now, changes come from so many places. You have some changes coming, from scope changes that basically people come and say, I would like extra stuff. Some change come because there's contingency planning and that risk becomes a reality. And we try to go and implement that risks and dealing with it at that particular point of time. That's another thing we go and bear in mind. Sometimes there's improvement changes. It could be someone within my department or in my team. They say, well, we found that there's a better way for us to go and do something specific. And because of that, we want to go and try to incorporate that changes and try to go and make some improvements. So change could happen from so many various places, including from the client, including from us, including from the actions and the risks we've actually went and evaluated. Now, the change management process we need to go and follow. what is that? We need to identify what is the change. We then need to say, all right, I know the change. I want to go and list expected effects of the proposed changes. How is the change going to affect schedule? How is the change going to affect budget? Because we really need to go and analyze that to make our decision whether to proceed or not. We need to review, evaluate that change, and we either approve it or disapprove it formally. Yeah, it's either yes or no. If we say it's yes or potentially no, we could negotiate and resolve conflicts of change, conditions, costing. We can discuss those things and try to really get an agreement and approval on those things. We can communicate changes to the parties affected so that they know that we are going to make the change. We can assign responsibilities to implement the change. So I could be the project manager ensuring the change runs smoothly. I could communicate to all my sales team and HR team and testing team because they will be affected by that change. And then when I go and do that, because there's a change, it's going to cost me more and it's going to take more time to be delivered. So I have to adjust both my schedule and my budget to reflect that I know it's going to cost me more to be able to get the job done. Finally, I need to track all of those changes that are being implemented, and I want to go and monitor that things are working as expected. You don't simply go and release a new website without monitoring and ensuring that this old website or this new website is now operating as expected. You don't just simply say, oh, let me go and do it and don't worry about the impact. You must always look at the impact and try to deal with it accordingly. So this is the process I'm talking about. Change come through. People submit a change request. We review the change request. It either gets approved or it does not get approved, and we go and review a new change request. If it gets approved, we know that that's going to go and have an impact on our schedule, an impact on our costing. We go and update our plan, update our record, update our budget, and we're going to go and distribute it to the right people to be able to go and start implementing that change as requested. So these are some of the things we need to go and bear in mind as we are really working on implementing that change. Now, this is an example of a change request form. Your people will come in, they tell you the request, they tell you the date, they tell you what it is. They describe it. I want to request river dances to replace small Irish dance group. Request one combination dance with river dancers and China ballet group. Okay, great. Reason for change. River dances will enhance the stature of the event. The event will be well known and loved by Chinese people. All right. What are the areas of proposed impact? Scope is changing. My cost is changing. Okay. What's the disposition? Approve. Approve as amended. Disapprove. Deferred. Priority. Urgent. Funding. Customer. Approval. So the people who need to go and sign, the project manager, the sponsor, and the customer will sign together and will agree on that particular change. This is another example. I've deleted a lot of the information there, but it's really from where I used to work in Career One. Change request, it's an emergency request. Initiated by, this is a date. Areas affected, product development, data migration. Okay, great. Priority, we can put it. Source, description, source file data component. Career One want to include source file name to be included in the billing job ID report. The source file name refers to the name of the feed file sent by the client within which the job appeared or was amended. Expected outcome. The report would have the source file name information required. Job action. A new and updated data component. Career One wants to include the job action data component of the billing job ID report. The data component would be able to distinctly indicate if the project is a new job or an updated job within the actual report. So basically the changes. What is the impact? Career One would not be able to identify the source file name or match it against the exported monster format feed. Query 1 would not be able to identify or distinguish whether a job is new or an updated job. Okay, let's make a technical assessment. Okay, let's think about it. Performed by who? What's the intended implementation plan? Implementation plan and estimated time to implement. Okay, the project management, project manager will look at that. The definition of business requirement, the business analyst will look at that. Detailed solution, technical analyst will do that. Detailed solution design, also senior developer will look at that. So you kind of try to have all of these things that need to be done and try to assign responsibilities of ensuring people are doing what is required. Test and communication planning. Well, test plan, how are we going to communicate with people? Back out plan. What if we go and introduce a change and that change doesn't work as expected? We need to have a way to go and back out to the actual old system that was working with no issue. Overall impact, client impact, system availability, capacity, speed, technical risk, resources, documentation, overall impact. You think about all of these various impacts that we really go and bear in mind. And finally, the recommendations. Sign off. We need to sign. The CIO needs to sign, the program manager must sign, the account manager must sign, the technical representative must sign. And finally, we implement the change. Some change is successful, some change is unsuccessful. So we go back, we back out to our old system and we make the comment, who closed it, when did they go and actually close it. So you basically see a very clear approach to go and really deal with all of these changes in an organization. This is an example of all of those changes. You think about description, reference document, dates, you have all of this information there. So sewer work offset. Okay, great. What's the amount? 188,000. Status open. Stainless plates of restroom. Okay, great. Date received. Date submitted. Perfect. The amount of cost. Okay, great. We know that. Status. Is it approved or is it actually not approved? We need to really go and think about that to be able to go and decide whether we go and do the right information. So some are approved, some are quoted, some are submitted. We basically try to look about all of this information before we go and decide what we are going to be able to go and really do. Now, when you have a change management process, that's good. Why? Because inconsequential changes are discouraged. You can't have someone come and say, oh yeah, I want you to make a change, but I'm going to go and I want you to go and jump over that other change. No, they're going to come over, they're going to come by one line, and we're going to go and try to evaluate them one by one and try to decide accordingly what we approve, what we don't approve. Cost of changes are maintained and logged. Integrity of the work breakdown structure and performance measures is maintained because the schedule requirements and the cost requirements before you implement a change is different than after you've actually got changes requested from you. So when change is requested, your schedule will change, your time will change, your budget will change, and you need to go and ensure you bear those changes accordingly. Responsibilities for implementations basically becomes clarified. When you know the change, you know who's doing it. Effect of changes is very clear. Everybody will be able to see it and everybody is monitoring whether things are working. Implementation is being monitored. Scope changes will be quickly reflected in the baseline and our performance will be very much being improved because we are implementing a very good approach to go and ensure we are managing changes within the organization. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, do you have any questions about this particular chapter, what I've just covered here? Any questions about that? Okay, so I'm having no changes been sent. Okay, no problem. Guys, I need you to review the lecture slides, the tutorial materials, and the notes you've taken. I need you to read chapter 7, which we'll talk about in further details now with the actual application of the tutorial. I want to again thank you very, very kindly for all your time and all your effort. We are actually now officially halfway throughout the session. I hope you're enjoying everything. I hope you're enjoying the learning you're getting out of the whole course. And I hope you basically maximize your potential into applying all of this learning now and obviously in the future in your career. Thank you very much for all your hard work. Keep working hard. I really, really thank you for your effort.